Let's start with clause number 1 of the standard, which is scope. This clause of the standard specifies when does organization need to implement 9001 standard. Why does organization implement it? There are two specific reasons which are given here for implementing ISO 9001 standard. Number 1, when the organization wants to demonstrate its ability to consistently provide products or service that meets customer requirements and that meets the legal requirements. So that's the one reason to implement a quality management system as per ISO 9001:2015. So here we have when the organization wants to demonstrate its ability. Demonstrate to whom? Demonstrate to its customers, demonstrate to interested parties, all interested parties. So when organization wants to demonstrate to its customer, to its interested parties, that the organization is able to consistently provide product, consistently provide a service which meets the requirements of customer and which meets legal requirements. And when I say legal requirements, standard specifies that as statutory and regulatory requirements. Here I have few items which are marked star here, asterisks here, which are product, service and customer. On next few slides, I will be talking about the definition of these specific terms. And as you would have already known that the definitions of the standard are provided in ISO 9000:2015. So this was the first reason to implement a quality management system as per 9001 standard. The second reason to implement the standard is to enhance customer satisfaction through effective application of system. So these are the two reasons to implement the quality management system. Demonstrate the ability to provide consistent product and service and to enhance customer satisfaction. Another thing in the scope is that the scope of this standard is generic in nature. And when I say generic in nature, which is here, so the requirements are generic. What does that mean is that this standard is applicable to all organizations, regardless of type, whether it's a production company or it's a service company or it's a project company, regardless of size, whether it's a small company, medium size or a big company, regardless of product and service provided, whether it's manufacturing nuts and bolts to whether it's manufacturing a rocket or it's providing the hospitality services, the requirements of standard remain same because the standard is generic in nature. So whatever size of the organization is, whatever type of the organization is, whatever the organization is producing, irrespective of that, all the requirements are applicable to all types of organization. So that is the scope of this standard 9001:2015. Coming to the clause 2 of the standard, which is normative references. So before we talk about this, let's understand what is normative reference. So the normative reference is a document which is indispensable for the application of 9001 standard or this standard. That means you cannot implement 9001 standard without understanding 9000. So 9000 must be used along with 9001 standard. So 9001 lists only one document as a normative reference, and which is 9000:2015. And this standard is quality management systems fundamentals and vocabulary. So as we go clause by clause to understand 9001 standard, I will be picking the definitions, appropriate definitions from 9000 and explaining those definitions here as we understand the clauses of 9001 standard. Coming to clause number 3 of ISO 9001:2015 standard, and the clause number 3 is terms and definitions. So probably here you would expect a list of terms and you would get definitions of those terms here in this section, but you won't find any terms listed here. So what does this standard do is, this standard refers to 9000 standard, ISO 9000:2015. So all terms and definitions related to 9001 are in ISO 9000:2015, and which is a normative reference as well, as we talked about that in clause number 2. So 9000:2015 is normative reference which must be used along with 9001, and 9000 also provides all the definitions and terms. So this completes the explanation of clause number 3. And as we have earlier talked, clause number 1, 2 and 3, these are more of administrative clauses. These do not give specific requirements. So once we move to clause number 4, you would start seeing specific requirements which the organization need to implement. Coming to clause number 4 of the standard, and the clause number 4 is context of the organization. This is a new concept which has been introduced in 2015 version, the context of the organization. ISO standard is generic in nature. This could be applied to any type of organization. So what we do here in context of the organization is, the first thing the organization need to do is to understand the environment of the organization under which it is operating. Because based on that, you can frame the policy, based on that you can frame the quality management system and other things. But before you do anything, an organization needs to understand the environment under which it operates. So that is what is the requirement in 4.1, which is the first sub clause of clause number 4, context of the organization. 4.1 is understanding the organization and its context. Second requirement in this is 4.2, which is understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So there are interested parties. First, you need to probably list all those interested parties and understand what they need and what they expect. We will be talking about these clauses, sub-clauses 4.1, 4.2, 4.3 and 4.4 specifically in later slides. But here let's get a general overview of clause number 4. So that's what we are doing here. Coming to the next sub-clause, which is 4.3. 4.3 is determining the scope of quality management system. So what is going to be the scope of quality management system for the organization where we are implementing this standard? Sub-clause 4.4 is quality management system and its processes. So this is what clause number 4 would cover. Coming to the next main topic or the main clause of the standard, which is clause number 5, leadership. Earlier in the previous standard, in 2008 version, we had a management representative and we had top management. Both management representative and top management had few roles assigned to them in 2008 version of the standard. In 2015 version of the standard, the required role of management representative has been removed. So now there is no specific requirement to have a management representative. But that has put a lot of emphasis on getting the top management involved in the quality management system. So as you will go through the requirements of this particular clause, you will understand that the role of leadership has been enhanced in implementing the quality management system. In this clause 5, we have three main subclauses, which are 5.1, which is leadership and commitment. And then we have 5.2, which is policy. And then 5.3 is on organizational roles and responsibilities and authorities. Coming to the next main clause of the standard, which is clause number 6, planning. Planning is an important part of any system. So if you understand PDCA cycle, which is planning, doing, checking, and acting, the first step in any activity is to plan. So initial few clauses of this standard are related to the planning part. A lot of emphasis is on planning. One thing you would see in this new standard 2015 version is introduction of the concept of risk-based thinking. So if we go to the sub clauses of this clause 6, which is planning, this has three sub clauses. 6.1, actions to address risks and opportunities. So here you would see the concept of risk has been introduced. Risk is something which has a negative effect on organization's objectives, whereas just opposite to risk, there are opportunities also. Opportunities have a positive effect on the organization's objective. So companies or the organizations need to look at both risks and opportunities. See how they can mitigate risk and how they can take the maximum advantage of opportunities. So clause 6.1, which is actions to address risks and opportunities, will cover number of these aspects. Second subclause here is 6.2, which is quality objectives and planning to achieve them. And 6.3, which is the last subclause of planning, is planning of changes. How the changes need to be managed so that these have minimum negative impact on the organization's objective. Coming to clause number 7 of the standard, which is support. In this clause, we have 5 subclauses. 7.1 resources, 7.2 competence, 7.3 awareness, 7.4 communication, and 7.5 documented information. There are few changes in this 2015 version of the standard. For example, if we look at 7.1, which is resources, here in this, a new concept of organizational knowledge has been introduced. So knowledge is also one of the resource a company or an organization has. How the organization takes the maximum advantage of knowledge management resource, that is covered here in this. Subclause 7.2, which is on competence, will be looking at the competence of people performing job. How do you ensure that people performing job are competent to do that? 7.3 will cover awareness. Awareness of quality policy, awareness of quality objective, awareness of their own work, how that contributes to achieving the company's objective. That's covered in 7.3. 7.4 is on communication. What to communicate, with whom to communicate, all those questions need to be answered here in clause number 7.4. 7.5 is documented information. Earlier in this presentation, we talked about that in previous versions of the standard, we had two terms, documents and records. Documents were something which were telling what to do, and records were something which were the information how the job has been done, the record of that. Now both documents and records have been clubbed together with a single term known as documented information. So the documented information will be covered in clause number 7.5. So let's have a quick recap of what all main clauses we have talked about so far. There were first three clauses which were more of administrative clauses. So clause number 1 was scope. Clause number 2 was normative references. Clause number 3 was terms and definitions. Clause number 4 was the context of the organization. Clause number 5 was on leadership. 6 was on planning. Clause number 7 was on support. So after these 7 clauses, now let's move on to the 8th clause, which is operation. This is the doing part of PDCA cycle. So far we talked about planning. In planning, we had the context of the organization, we talked about leadership, we talked about planning, we talked about support. Now comes the actual doing of the job, which comes under clause number 8, which is operation. So here in clause number 8, we have 7 sub clauses. So let's quickly go to these 7 sub clauses, and then we will study about these 7 sub clauses in detail in further slides. So here 8.1 is operational planning and control. 8.2 is requirements for products and services. 8.3 is on design and development of products and services. 8.4 is control of externally provided processes, products and services. 8.5 is production and service provision. 8.6 is release of products and services. And the last subclause of this is 8.7, which is control of non-conforming outputs. So having covered so much, now we are left with just 2 main clauses, which is clause number 9, performance evaluation, and clause number 10, which is improvement. So let's start with this clause number 9, which is performance evaluation. So if you look at PDCA cycle, now you are in checking stage. You planned the activity, you did the activity. Now what you want to do is you want to check this activity, whether the activities are being performed as planned or not. So in checking part, in clause number 9, performance evaluation, you have 3 sub clauses. 9.1 on monitoring, measurement, analysis and evaluation. 9.2 is internal audit, and 9.3 is management review. So welcome to this last and the final main clause of the standard, which is clause number 10, improvement. So if you look at PDCA cycle, P for planning, D for doing, C for checking, and A for acting. Now you are in A phase of PDCA cycle, where you want to act on the findings, act on the checking. Whatever things you did, you checked that, and now you want to act to make sure that the next operation is better. So you want to improve your processes. So that is the clause number 10, which is improvement. This clause has 3 main subclauses. 10.1 is general, 10.2 is non-conformity and corrective action, and 10.3 is continual improvement. Probably if you are aware of 2008 version or the previous versions of the standard, anywhere you had corrective action, there was a term around that which was preventive action. You would find that the term preventive action is missing from here. Preventive action has been dropped from 2015 with the understanding that implementing this quality management system in itself is a preventive action. And instead, risk based thinking has been introduced in this standard, which we have already talked about earlier.